We are here. Yes, you are now listening to the sounds of Sports Reports is Ordered. And it's me, down here, down in the Alamo. Your unorthodox statistician going left so much you thought I was Southpaw. And as you can see on the screen, I knew Bama was in. We gonna talk about it. And then across from me, of course, we have the one and only, the world renowned. Born in Texas, raised in VA, representing New Jerusalem. He is even killed. And he wants you to know that New Jersey has been satisfying your urges because Atlantic City is where saltwater taffies were created. Bam! Don't bring feelings to a fact fight.
Not y'all here.
All right, let's get into this. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. And here we go. So, Mr. Logical.
I'm listening.
You know what I'm saying? I know that you've seen the hit heard around the world. And, you know, contrary to popular belief, it is not Jake Paul hitting Nate Robinson. You know, so the shot heard around the world was Trevor Lawrence sliding. And, Aziz Al-Shair. Oh, he laid that man out. You know what I mean? I thought it was over for Sunshine, you know, and luckily he was alert. You know, he was on the golf cart leaving the field. So glad that he's okay. But here's the question. Was it dirty or have we gotten soft?
All right. So this is always an interesting conversation. I think because we always have these arguments about different eras. I think the NFL players of previous eras, the Ronnie Lott, Charles Haley's, your Steve Atwater's, Christian Okoye, you mean like the big hitters, your Romanowski's, your Chuck Cecil's. I don't think that they were bigger. Even Ryan Clark, like Ryan Clark talked about it. He was only 5'9", 190 pounds. So I don't think that the current players play the same way as the old players, because if they did, some of these guys are like, as far as size comparisons, are astronomical. There's a lot of 6'3", 6'4" corners. It's a lot of linebackers that are running 4.5s and 4.4s. So if they were allowed to hit the way these guys were hitting in the 90s, you would see a lot of Trevor Lawrence injuries every week. That being said, it was deliberate. I think he meant to hit him for just the nature of what they tell you to do. Like, you want to make an impact on the game. You want to hit these guys in the mouth, proverbially hit him in the mouth. I think he was trying to hit him. It's just when he put the forearm up, there's nothing he could do to stop him from hitting him in the head. I think he wanted to get a good hit on him. I think if he could have hit him in the ribs and taken the penalty, but not hit him in the head and knocked him out, like give him that, think about it when he comes in the outside, very old school mentality on the play. The problem is he looks like a crash out because of his previous behavior. He had this situation on the sideline in the Chicago game. He slapped the guy in the helmet. Just different incidents throughout the year, just kind of towing the line, hitting guys out of bounds. And I get it. You want guys to play to the edge of their emotions and get you wins, but there is a level of self-control you have to exhibit as well. And I think he meant to hit him. It just, when he put the forearm up, it was like there's nothing he could do. Because if he thought Trevor was going to keep running, the form tackle would have been head up, hands through. So even when he went down to hit him, he wouldn't have had one forearm in his head cocked one way. It would have been a little bit more aggressive, like a little bit more sound tackling technique. So I think it was intentional to send a message, but I don't know if he meant to like knock him out. I want to say that, but I know I could tell it was definitely a message being sent.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Unchecked behavior escalates. The first time you hit somebody, if they don't retaliate, you hit them again. This goes back to when you were kids. Pop somebody upside the head. They don't retaliate. You just pop them harder each time until they finally fight back. So the NFL has had the opportunity to handle this individual, and they haven't. So you brought up the play against Chicago earlier this year on the sideline, Sunday Night Football.
Right.
He threw a punch on that sideline as well. But then as I was going through reading about him, I discovered something that I forgot. So I remember seeing it in live action, but he's not an elite player in that way, so he's just not talked about a lot. So do you remember this?
I saw the video. I saw the video today. Wearing 0 makes him look like a smaller player too. So 51, he looks like a linebacker. 0, he looks more like a corner. I think it's just a number, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I think he likes to send messages, playing with all the braces. Like, listen, I am this tough. I'm playing with damaged elbows and joints and triceps. I'm out here. I'm playing to the max extent of my capabilities. And like I said, you could toe the line, but I think he's like a habitual line stepper. 3 games, more than likely, he's going to get appealed. I don't like appeal processes. I remember dealing with my own appeals throughout, different times in my life. And it's like, how I make an appeal to the person who levied the punishment. Like, yo, dog, I know you made this decision 2 days ago, but can you change your mind?
But think about this.
Like, can you think about what you were allowed to do and then enact it, and then can you change your mind?
But see, the crazy thing about it to me is, okay, let's say you don't punish him for trying to choke Tom Brady or whatever that was. You know what I mean? It was an innocent play. He's reaching and it just landed wrong. Okay, I can buy that. But then when you add up all the other instances, it's kind of like, well, so you see a player like, say, Ndamukong Suh. He got disciplined, and he's a hell of a way better player than Shahir is. And from that standpoint,
giving bum ass excuses for, like, when he stomped on old boy's legs, like, I was trying to get my foot out.
Right.
But his size 16 was completely out of that dude grip. He stepped on the back of his leg.
But I say that to say, you would think that a player at his level would have a shorter leash than someone at that level.
Talent versus tolerance.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
You see, he was in San Francisco. He probably was with D'Amico Ryans, who was like, I'm getting his head gig in Houston. Come with me. So it's talent versus tolerance.
Yeah.
Like I said, 3 games is excessive.
Definitely, 100%.
Because I remember the Giants kicker hit his wife and only got a game.
Well, remember, they knew about that, and that came out way later.
Yeah.
And then they just threw him on the exemption list.
Yeah, Ray Rice only got 2 games, and he, until
the public saw the video. The NFL saw that video, and until the public saw it,
I think they're more upset with him that the potential that Mac Jones is going to have to go start more football games, the ratings for already.
And that's the thing about quarterbacks, because I'm Mr. Not to shit out the quarterback, but
Jacksonville for years has been suffering the blackouts, like the threats of blackouts if they didn't get enough people locally to buy tickets. Because I remember when I first heard blackout, like, what does that mean? Like, they weren't going to play the game on local television if the local fans didn't buy enough tickets to fill the stadium. That was going to be like the punishment for like the local people. Like, they'll still put it on nationally if it was available, but the local TV wouldn't play.
Well, see, football players are lucky that they don't have baseball's culture. Because like that play against the 49ers earlier this year where Patrick Mahomes kind of tapped on the sideline and he got let go and ran for like another 20 yards. If this was baseball, the next play he would have got rocked for no reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then Brock Purdy would have got hit.
Right. So
Somebody with a tick,
from
yeah.
that standpoint, I think we've gone too far left. And that's the problem with us as a nation, I guess. Like back in the day, a lot of men, unfortunately, treated women a certain way. And now, like, we've course corrected, but the pendulum has gone too far the other way to where women aren't accountable.
Yeah.
And that's where we are in situations like this, where the offensive player or the defensive player is held accountable for what he does to the quarterback. But these quarterbacks are getting away with things like the fake slide, Kenny Pickett in college against Wake Forest in the ACC
The
title game.
fact that people thought that was a dope move was goofy to me.
I mean, it was dope in the moment because you hadn't seen it, but after a while, you were just like, "That was cheap."
Nah, as soon as he did it, it was like it was cheap. I would have much rather him pump fake the ball like he was going to throw it and make the
That
dude
gets me every time too, where a dude is already past the line of scrimmage by like 5 yards, and they still fall for it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing, is that all the rules benefit the offense, when it comes to these type of things. Because if you remember, Hines Ward used to knock people out, with his blindside blocks and just like face mask, right? There's a thin line between a face mask and a stiff arm.
Yeah, it's very thin. It's hair thin.
Yeah.
The thing with the NFL, I don't want to just bash them completely for the rules. They make rules that help the defense as far as safety, but they make a lot more rules that hurt the defense in this for the sake of offense. Like, and I get it, these guys, they're out there trying to hit each other, but like illegal contact, holding, and all these things resulting in penalties. And I figured as a linebacker, like, listen, I got to make an impact play where I can. So
but how do you?
I can't hit the wide receiver. If you hit the wide receiver too hard, a lot of times those guys are getting hit in the ribs, they're getting hit in the shoulder. That it just looks bad, but they throw the flag on you, and then there's no review. And I don't think the quick review in New York sends a message either. So unless somebody else on the field, another ref on the field that has that presence that can come to you, whoever threw the flag, and say, no, man, it was clean.
Well, going back to that,
if you're the head ref, he hit him, definitely hit him in the head. It's like you just kind of,
Well, stepping back for a second, let me make a left turn here, because I just thought about this as you were saying that. So how does one earn a reputation to get away with things? So like, for example, you have guys like Richard Sherman and Sauce Gardner who are very physical with receivers, in this new era. But I see people like Joey Porter Jr. and Brian Branch, or I'm sorry, Terrion Arnold.
Oh,
yeah, get called for these.
Stop throwing the flag on him.
Yeah. So how do we get from that? How do we get that difference in how the players are being policed?
Maybe there's a meeting with the coaches ahead of time, and they kind of go over like with the crew and the refs, and they go over like just certain points of emphasis, or the league reaches out to the refs and say, hey, we've been seeing a lot of offensive linemen lined up in the backfield. We got to call, especially if this one guy does it a lot. But with Richard Sherman, I think it's because he was so good at attacking the ball. Like, he was so good at getting interceptions. Maybe because he was allowed to be a little bit more handsy. I think it just was his reputation of being a good ball hawk.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing with Dion. Like, Dion was so good at recovering that you didn't always know he pulled the guy back to use his speed. Like, he trailed off a little bit and then pulled the guy back to get that underneath deflection or something like that, because he was so good. He was so good in his technique. Sauce Gardner had this same kind of, I think, that same cachet, but I saw some videos recently where he was just kind of just getting burnt. So now he's grabbing, like he's full on, like out of position. But
and they started calling it earlier this year.
If you're elite enough to be there, I think you just know, I could get my hand here, but don't turn them. I could get my hand on the jersey, but don't tug it. So you just get a little tighter. That way you don't have to pull on the jersey. You can slow them down by just you get in his arm so he can't get the little things like that. I think just your veteran savvy kind of gets you that. Terriano, for some reason, I think it was one game he just got like 3 flags thrown. I'm like, yo, that was all. Those are all clean.
Yeah,
But
and but yeah. So from the standpoint of like, there are certain. I brought that up to say there are certain individuals on defense who get the benefit of the doubt, but the rules lean way more towards the offense because people always say things. I have these conversations with people and they say, do you really want to watch a 16-13 game? And I'm like, it could be entertaining. Like, and if it's only a few games out of a 14 game slate, so be it.
It's a lot of games on TV.
Yeah, like if you run into a 16-13 game, turn the channel if you don't want to watch it. But there, like if back in the early, or not early, but mid 2000s, when you were watching, say, the Titans and the Ravens, I didn't care that it was 10-9. You know, so I wanted to see Ray Lewis hit Eddie George. You know, I wanted to see these two teams mix it up and get physical, like how I was talking about the Steelers and the Ravens 2 weeks ago. You know, you'll allow that game to be physical because of those teams' reputation. You know, but if another team, like say the Raiders, try to rough up Kansas City, then you might see more of those calls made. You know,
the thing with the Raiders is just
they have that reputation
out of place because it's only Max Crosby really doing it. So it looks like it doesn't look like a cohesive group of forceful impact players. It looks like one guy being chippy after the fact. But with the Ravens, there's so many guys flowing to the ball. The Steelers, there's so many guys making plays on the ball that it looks like an overwhelming like herd of aggressive tacklers. Whereas like some teams is just a couple of dudes with attitudes. Like the Chiefs, it's just Kelsey. Kelsey's the only dude on offense that gets trippy. Everybody else is, so it looks out of place. But if everybody was like real physical, it just would look like the flow of the game, and then the rest would just kind of just maintain the overall flow of the game. That's what they do with the Steelers and the Ravens. I bet there's not a lot of penalties called in those games. Just because
probably not, even though the Ravens are one of the top teams in the league in penalties, but in that like game, probably not.
That game, because it's allowed because it's across the board, each side of the ball.
Right, and that's why I'm really interested in the Browns Steelers game this weekend because I feel like it's going to be another one of those tug of war type games. I want to see how it's officiated because, like, we noticed that in basketball. You know, like on a certain night, like these tic-tac calls are getting called, but then the next game 3, they let people be physical again because somebody's trying to assume command of the series.
You call that probably every playoff round we did last playoffs round. You're like, hey, game 3 is going to be the game where one team gets 20 first quarter free throws.
Mm-hmm. And that's where
your star is one star is going to be on the bench and the other star is going to stay on the floor. You call
because that's where the leagues are nowadays. They're trying to generate offense. You know, back in the day, the late 90s, it was chicks dig the long ball, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds.
Yeah, they weren't testing for steroids.
Yeah, they weren't testing, but now they're demonizing.
After the strike, they were like, man, we got to get people in here. They were like, listen, we're going to turn a blind eye for 3 years. Because, like, remember Lenny Dykstra had, like, 35 home runs.
Brady Anderson hit 50, and then
chops.
Yeah, and then he had like one other season of 20 home runs. Like it was just ridiculous. Like it's like the drug dealer, right? You know, like you start getting money and you go buy a Corvette. It's like if you'd have bought like a 1996 Honda Civic, nobody would have messed with you.
No one would have messed with you.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah,
furniture for your mom and your grandma, you'd have been good to go. But nah,
you
got to get 2 Lexuses.
But that's where we are. That's where we are. So I wanted to get your opinion. I wanted to ask you a question about as we peruse through the NFL, we're getting closer to the playoffs. Divisions are going to start being clinched. For example, you know, Kansas City can clinch the AFC West with a win over the Chargers this weekend. You know, so as we get closer and closer,
like 7th, 8th year in a row or something.
Yeah. I just got a question for you. Just one question. I know that nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, but are they the team to beat?
In the AFC or overall?
Just overall, in general.
I would say no to NFL because I think I think Philly has weapons that they employ properly. I think what you're getting in Detroit, even though they had the luckiest collapse ever. I know we talked about it, but like just the Chicago collapse. But even with that, they would have been what 10-2 after that. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been like they were on the fringe of losing the division. Uh, I like Buffalo. I like the joy. Like I said, I think they're playing with house money. I think they're playing free. I think they made probably one of the better like in season trade deadline moves by getting Amari Cooper. Because if you think about it,
What up,
Keanu been
Mike?
out for a couple of games. Going on, Mike? I like them, but I think they're the team to beat in the AFC, even over Kansas City. I mean, granted, they have the head-to-head matchup over Kansas City where they won. I think they're the team to beat. It's just if Kansas City keeps winning, they're gonna have to go to Arrowhead and do it. Luckily, the weather probably is going to be the same with the lake.
Maybe.
Yeah. So
All they need is the Chiefs to lose one more game. They got the tiebreaker. They're only a game behind.
they're only a game behind. Yeah.
Yeah, Kansas City lose and Buffalo's right in there. I mean, obviously, I don't know if Buffalo's going to win like 12 straight games or something like that, but but they're in there in the moment. So I think at this moment, Detroit has so many injuries that
Yeah.
I can't.
That's
I can't look at them as the team to beat. Just they could beat the Bears though, Mike. You know what I'm saying? They could beat the Bears, but I don't know if they're the team to beat at this moment until they get healthy again. And we'll find out soon because guess what? On Thursday night, they got the Packers coming in. So we'll see how that goes. They played them up last month. The conditions, all that stuff going on. Jordan Love giving the ball to the others. So we'll see. Get it indoors.
Souvenirs.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But Philly is on a tear right now. The only problem with Philly is if it comes down to a tight game, and I'm not going to do the hyperbole, can Jalen Hurts make the throw to – no. Can Jalen Hurts play the quarter? Can he be consistent enough in a fourth quarter of a tight game where Saquon is slowed down some, where the offense just isn't flowing? Can he make the plays to overcome that? I don't know.
I have to.
Maybe not. But
that's the difference because I would I argue this point to him in the face. You can still get yards running the ball. You can still get big plays running the ball. You can still get big plays by throwing short passes. You don't have to be airing it out like Eric Jameis and Cleveland. Like
no, I know that, but I'm just
meaning. And I think the threat of Jalen Hurts with the design quarterback runs. And he smartly gets out of bounds and he gets down. So his quarterback runs are just very deliberate. Like I saw
what you're saying is
too. I think they can ride Saquon even if Jalen's having an off quarter because the only way to fully stop Jalen Hurts from having you're gonna have to play zone. You can't play man to man because Devontae Smith's a great route runner, great high point in the ball. AJ Brown is huge. A tight end matched up with a safety or a linebacker because you're trying to stuff the box to stop Saquon. It's just you're inadvertently gonna make it easier on Jalen to make plays, either in the passing game, outside the pocket, just trying to stop Saquon. And if you don't, I just think they have the perfect balance. I think I still don't trust the coach all the way, but when you have it going, I think it's just like I said, you can't stop it all. Like even with Jalen his numbers are I think he has like 14 touchdowns, maybe 15 touchdowns. Yeah.
Right along the Saquon train, but so basically what you're saying is, you ready for me to do the thing?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So basically what you're saying is Jalen Hurts has the heart that Lamar Jackson doesn't.
What? That doesn't even make any sense.
Whoa, what?
People make that jump?
What?
That doesn't make any sense.
Who said that?
I don't know what's going on in Baltimore other than they are. It's just they're like there needs to be like a voice in the room that can just say whatever to you that you need to hear, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not sure if there's a voice in that locker room that says like, "Yo, why is Derrick Henry not getting the ball 26 to 29 times a game? Either screen passes, even like because we talked about
Because Justice Hill is going to run these here screens.
and it's so obvious. Like I said it last week. It's like, with Justice Hill in the game, I don't know if Derrick Henry doesn't have great hands. You don't have to run him on dig routes and post routes and curls. You could just throw 2 or 3 screens a game. They have the tight ends that they can have the formation look a certain way. They have big tight ends that block. If Rashard is healthy, that's a 300-pound fullback. You have Lamar that can create space with the screen. I mean, it's like you could do so much with Lamar and Derrick Henry. And we talk about Todd Monken,
I was about to bring it up.
Yeah, Ravens. His brother's the head coach of Army. Army has a running package that has the quarterback running for a lot of yards, the fullback gets touches, and any running back in the game gets a lot of plays. I'm like, so you can't text your brother over Thanksgiving like, "Yo, dog, let me get like 6 or 7 of those plays."
Yeah, nobody's telling you to run the triple option.
Yeah, but like, let me some of those misdirection blocks, because that's like I said, to speak of Philly, I saw in the all 22 from the Ravens Philly game where they pulled the guard and the center to the right. RPO, the fake was Saquon pulled the guard to the right. Saquon to the right of Jalen Hurts. He faked it to him. Saquon runs out. Linebacker jumps with him, and Jalen Hurts follows the guard in the center through the hole for a 10-yard gain. That's basically what Army does. It's like misdirection, but you hit the hole deliberately. It's not a lot of wiggle. It's like, let's get eyes going this way. Let's get running downhill this way. Man, hey, bro, let me get 6 of these plays that your quarterback has popped. Let me implement them to what we're doing over here with Lamar and Derrick.
With probably the fastest quarterback. Well, maybe not the fastest, but
like just like the elusiveness that he runs with. And Derrick Henry, once again, we talked about their stats. It was like there's something like 4-0 when he got 20 touches. He got 19.
But does Lamar Jackson need to be reprogrammed? Because when I see him in these moments,
somebody needs to say like, "Yo, they need to sit down and say, hey, you don't need to throw the ball more than 30 times. You need to give him the ball 25 times. That's it."
And because when I watched that Philly game, I saw the AFC Championship game again. I saw moments that Lamar could have, and I'm not saying, hey, if he'd have took off there, he'd have went 82 yards. I ain't saying all that, but he'd have got a first down. He would have got 8 yards and made it 3rd and 2, something along those lines. But in that Kansas City game, he froze, which was crazy because I was like, but they're at home though, so it's not like they're at Arrowhead but then I watched this game and I'm like, they're at home, so it's not like they're at the link.
I think he buys into. Remember, like the last couple of years, Hollywood Brown started doing it. Maybe a couple other guys.
Hollywood Brown. Oh,
they would go to Twitter after games where they only had 2 or 3 targets, maybe only a few catches. And I believe Lamar throughout the week makes it somewhat of a priority to get these guys the ball, because he knows the narrative is that you can't get top flight wide receivers to want to come play with you.
Right.
That's the conversation.
And we talked about that because I brought up Devontae Adams.
Yeah, and the reason I said Devontae, it wouldn't be a good fit because Devontae puts his foot in the ground on that slant, he's expecting the ball. Lamar surveys the field a couple of times because I think he knows he can make the big play, or he can scramble out of there, or he has a check down. We know if Justice Hill's in the game, he's going to leak out to the left, and that's going to be his check down. I think he tries to get these guys the ball deliberately because he knows any given time I could run the ball for 30 or 40 yards like he did in the end of the game against Philly. Granted, they
Yeah.
were playing like a shell coverage, and he just basically ran through it. But in a blitz situation in the first quarter, you don't get home, and this man to man on the back end, he could take off. But I think he tries to get these guys the ball. He tries to play more traditional pocket quarterback,
And,
and it just doesn't always work out.
and for
And then,
the
like I said, I
record,
don't know what the voice is that says, okay, cool, shut all this down. Let's run Derek 8 times in a row if we have to.
I would take Curtis Conway over Hollywood Brown. But as I look at the Ravens, they're just confusing because I think both of us had them progressing very far this season in the playoffs and everything. But of course, one of my concerns was they let 3 offensive linemen go though. So, so you say to yourself, Lamar can survive that for a few games. He improvises enough that he can slide a little bit as he needs to, not necessarily just take off and
Derrick
run,
Henry still
but he
has
can
over 1,300
slide.
yards.
You got Derrick Henry back there, so on and so forth. But now, here we are 13, 14 games into the season. It's like, bro, it's go time.
Well,
Like
they got a bye this week, so hopefully I think the Army Navy game is next week. Maybe his brother will go to the practice and just kind of check out what Army does, implement it. And I know it sounds crass and simple to just kind of like just look from the outside from my microphone and say, man, all you gotta do is run the ball. But your record dictates that.
right.
I know we're going to talk about college football, but I heard a stat earlier today: the Ohio State Michigan game, like whoever's won the rushing yards has won a game like 23 times in a row. Like I didn't have time to confirm it, but that was something I saw on TV. So just being able to
You
run
know
the
what?
ball, manage the clock, and like I said, I believe offensive linemen at their core would rather run block because I don't think some quarterbacks buy offensive lineman gifts. Wide receivers don't. Running
Mm-hmm.
backs definitely do. Running backs definitely buy the Rolexes or
Well, yeah, Cam Ward just hooked up the
$2,000,
whole offensive line. I mean, he's a quarterback,
2,000.
obviously.
Buy them 2,000 pounds worth of beef each in a deep freezer to keep it all in all year. Like those guys love downhill run blocking, and you have a guy like Derrick Henry. It's to me is a no brainer. And when he got signed, everyone was like, okay, you had the best running attack in the league already. Now you get 6'4", 235 that can run like a gazelle. But it feels like if he doesn't pop a big one, they just go away from it. Like with other teams like Detroit, they keep running the ball. Philly keeps running the ball. Atlanta does try to do a pretty good job running the ball, but like when they have to throw it, it's just they can really load the box and they can't really get it off. But if when they're on, when Bijan and Algier are both on and they're running different speeds and different directions with those two backs, it's you can really change the momentum of a game. You can change the momentum of your season if you lock that in. They wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
5 losses if and of those 5 losses in those couple of those games they just ran the ball more. Both
Right.
Alabama they caught one pick, maybe 9-4.
Yeah. So, it's just one of those things, where at the end of the day, we just want to see Lamar succeed. I'm not a Ravens fan, but, I enjoy watching him play. So I would like to see him overcome the odds, of being that running quarterback that breaks through. I don't count Patrick Mahomes as that type of runner, and I think that the Ravens, this is the first time since they've existed that I feel like they don't have an identity. Like they just kind of come into every week as this is what we're going to do, but it's not. Back in the day, it was we're going to pound you, pause. We're going to push you around. We're going to beat you up. And at the end of the game, you're going to know that you played us. Now it's more like, hey man, like this is a passing league. Just throw the ball. It's like that's not what got you
The
there.
the pass attempts. And another thing, and I get that Derrick Henry is one of one. Like it's not a bunch of dudes, but if you're gonna have a back that big in the free agent market or the practice squad market, you can get another bruiser back to kind of just keep that. It's not it's not very cohesive, and I think that's the problem. And it could be because we talked about Mike Tomlin. You might be there too long,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe a lot of teams are getting to that point where it's like we
Okay.
are
What's up?
shout out. We are
The Yukai.
that was disarming. We are getting to the point where it's just you might have to switch it up.
And so I mean, are the Ravens still a Super Bowl contender?
No,
Like, do you still think that they can make the AFC Championship game?
no, because they're not doing
They're not doing Raven things.
anything in the regular season that they can carry over to type playoff mode.
And I mean, this time around, you're probably going to Arrowhead. You're going to Orchard Park.
Yeah,
So
you go
from
like if you looked at every other AFC contender, uh, you can think about Buffalo. Buffalo's gonna pause ride Josh Allen.
a lot of riding
They,
going on
they give
around
the
the league.
ball. They give the ball to Cook. They have like I said, they have a real run identity. I think their offensive line plays with great cohesion. I think they move well together. If you look at a team like San Francisco, the injuries, you can see where it's like this isn't sustainable, and this is what the Ravens are doing. Is like 1 week what they can do is sustainable, and then the next week it isn't. Like they're so inconsistent that you don't know what team's going to show up first round of playoffs. So for that, I can't make them a contender. With Buffalo, I know what they're going to do. They're going to lean on Josh Allen, not right. Lean on Josh Allen to make the plays. I think their defense plays smart. I think Von Miller does just enough to kind of keep that leadership on the defensive side of the ball. Mark Cooper, level-headed wide receiver, making big plays.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, like
Well, I mean,
Baltimore, it's
they
weird.
have the
They
schedule.
have all the talent. They have, like I said, they're 8-5. Even with all this
Mm-hmm.
pseudo dysfunction at 8-5, it's just I don't know what Baltimore I'm gonna get Sunday after Sunday.
Well, they have the schedule. They get the Giants coming off the bye. They get
And they'll win
Pittsburgh.
that game by 27.
They get Pittsburgh the week after that. They get Beyonce on Christmas, and then they close out with the Browns. And Jameis has never met a pick six that he didn't want to throw.
I don't know what he thinks.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so crazy, right? Like, if you're Jameis Winston's fantasy football owner, like, just think of the level of emotions you have during the course of a game. Like, you're like, he's got 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. Like, hold on, wait, he did what?
The year he threw 30 touchdowns and 30 picks, the 30th pick was a pick six that he threw against Atlanta.
Yeah.
I was like, I knew he was done after that, so I felt bad for him. I was happy for Atlanta and Deion Jones because he took it back to the house, but it was like in overtime nonetheless. It was like not only did you have like a historically just abhorrent season, it ended in overtime on a pick six.
Speaking of Atlanta, should I get my fork ready?
Oh yeah, man, that they on simmer.
I don't know what that was. They get Minnesota this week. Going up there. So
it's just not. It's not. It's the same thing. It's like you have these pieces and they aren't employed and deployed properly. You have a tight end with top end speed that's greater than wide receivers. You took a wide receiver, big target. He's not that elusive, so you got to move him around. That's fine. Scheme him open. You took a running back the year after that, and then you took another quarterback the same year. You got a free agent quarterback. To have 4 draft picks in a row all be offense, and then sign your biggest offseason acquisition was a quarterback, $180 million. There should be a plan for those 4 guys and Penix as a backup to thrive. Every single week, it should look like I have 3 top 10 offensive weapons and a $180 million quarterback, and it never does. like you had every week it should look like how it looked with Kansas City with Kelsey and Cheetah, and I think Edwards-Helaire. Granted, I don't expect those kind of numbers, but I need to be deliberate. Like the big shot was going to Cheetah. 3rd and 8, 3rd and 11, I'm getting Kelsey. Or screen pass, I'm getting.
You see, they starting to run those. You see the Chiefs starting to run those Kelsey plays with Noah Gray. Send them little tosses out the backfield, the little shovel passes, and they're giving him the Kelsey package. Pause.
Yeah, so it's like,
but real quick,
like I said, that looks like an active, deliberate thing. And you're too late in the season for people to try to figure out what's going on. Like it's the same problem. A lot of these teams that got out the gate early, 4, 5, 6 wins early, and they having 3, 4 losses in a row.
Houston,
what you were doing, Houston, the Jets, Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore with their inconsistency is like what you were doing early was barely working. Kansas City's in that boat, but they seem to find a way. Somehow the football gods kind of graced them with victories, but it's still a grind. It still takes a lot of effort to make that happen.
Well, I'm leaning Green Bay on Thursday.
Against Detroit.
Yeah.
Well, just you can't keep losing defensive linemen and linebackers.
Raider fan and checking in. The black hole is checking in. Speaking of refs, you ready for me to make you mad now?
Yeah.
The refs are the reason that South Carolina is not in the college football playoff right now.
Oh, let's hear. Elaborate.
Those 2 called back pick sixes against LSU for blocking a quarterback. So they lost to Ole Miss. They lost to Bama. But they would have one less loss at least. And that's the difference, right? Because what threw me off about the committee, and I'm not going to bitch about it per se, I'm just going to bring up, just something that I had thought about. So like me personally, and I know that my thoughts don't necessarily matter, but
they do.
I think that Ole Miss is better than Bama, first of all. You know what I mean? But I also think that Ole Miss has worse losses. So South Carolina, I had a South Carolina fan, shout out to the original fan, Chris, telling me that, well, South Carolina beat Oklahoma at Norman badly, and they beat Vandy at Vandy and shut them out. So why ain't we above Bama? Because you lost to Bama. Forget what you did. You know what I'm saying?
Old stuff.
You got your homeboys to whoop Bama for you, and you couldn't do it. So you don't get to claim that. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? So as we this is from the official college football playoff website, looking at these rankings here. So this is where this is what I'm talking about here. This 11 through 14, Bama, Miami, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. So let's start it off from the top, Mr. Logical. Why Bama in front of Miami?
I think the committee is thinking that Miami didn't overwhelm them with their 10 wins. A lot of them were comeback wins. If we think about the Virginia Tech game where the call got overturned,
there was a review in the Cal game.
Like, hey, Miami is, one drop third down pass and one of these in game 6, 7, or 8 away from being, an 8-4 team. And then they go out and lose to Syracuse when they were up. So I think that's what they're looking at. I don't know why.
Or did everybody that got losses to some degree?
Yeah, I think Miami in the playoff as far as an entertainment aspect of it, considering that Cam Ward's probably going to be, I'll say, 3rd in the Heisman, or he'll be in the running for the Heisman potentially, and then maybe even a top potential draft pick in the NFL.
I'm sorry, Miami.
If he was in the college football playoffs, I imagine that he would play. I know some guys might not play in these bowl games.
Right.
I feel like they're making, like they planted the seeds a couple of weeks ago, with the Illinois, Georgia back and forth. I just believe that the SEC they do have the narrative of toughest conference. A lot of NFL players come out of it. But if we're the calm voice in the room, we can look and say this 93 Alabama team looked like a 93 Alabama team. The way they got beat in their two games that they should have won.
But see, this is the
you can't lose both of these. You can't lose to Oklahoma. You can't lose to Vandy.
But this is the problem.
You can't lose, and you lose them both, in such a fashion where it wasn't like Vandy was just like hitting just great plays. Strip a fumble here and a kickoff, like these loosey goosey plays. They had the ball for like 41 minutes or something like that, or something crazy. And then, like I said, Oklahoma ran the ball 50 times for 250 yards.
Well, see, the problem is that the SEC loves to have their cake and eat it too. So let's play a quick game. So we looked at the strength of schedule rankings, and we found 13 out of the top 17 are SEC teams. Which comes from being overinflated coming into every season because of what they did in the past. So we have 7 or 8 SEC teams ranked in the top 25 to start the season. So as the season goes on, you're picking up ranked wins. All right. So let's roll with this for a second. So looking at Miami, and first of all, before I go any further, I do think Bama should be ahead of Miami, but devil's advocate, because I want to be fair. I don't want to be biased because I have that opinion. So let's just check this out for a second. The most hated thing, transitive property. But this is the problem. So Miami hasn't beat a ranked team until this week, because Syracuse is now ranked after beating Miami this past weekend. A game where Miami had a 21-0 lead that they got outscored 42-17 the rest of the way.
Yeah.
That's first and foremost. But this is the problem with the SEC. In one breath, they'll tell you, hey, Ole Miss went into the swamp. Do you know how tough it is to go into the swamp and win? Like, you can't knock them for losing that game to Florida. But they ain't giving Miami credit for going into the swamp and dominating.
Oh, that was early in the year. Florida.
Exactly. Yeah. That was before Florida had the different quarterback. That was before. Don't matter. It was on the schedule. You played it. We got a result. Yes, South Carolina is probably playing better than Bama and Ole Miss right now. But it doesn't matter. Both of those teams beat them. But to continue, you look at a team like Texas sitting up there at number 2. Yeah, they're 11-1. Great record. Oh, my goodness. They're playing in the SEC championship game in their first year in the conference. They could win the SEC the first time around. But, Mr. Logical, as I scroll down this screen, I'm looking. Are you following at home? Because I'm looking. There ain't a team in this fucking top 25 that Texas beat.
But they don't have any losses. They don't have the
but it goes back to the point of strength of schedule. It goes back to Texas A&M is the only team that Texas played that was worth anything in the SEC as far as their victories. They got manhandled by Georgia. So basically, Texas is in the college football playoff because they didn't have to play Ole Miss. They didn't have to play Bama. They didn't have to play South Carolina. They didn't have to play Tennessee. They didn't have to go to LSU on a Saturday night.
You play who's on your schedule. You
do, but I'm just saying, but keep it real.
Not look at another team and being like, oh, that's fine.
I'm just saying, keep it real.
Bama lost to 2 nobodies.
Yeah, and they're going to be in the playoff.
Losses were to Georgia and Ole Miss. They lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. If they don't,
in Tennessee,
teams, but I mean, they lost. Tennessee's I want to say a good.
Yeah. Tennessee's going to be in the playoff. Yeah,
it's competing for the college football playoff. You're 11-1, right along with Texas. If you don't lose those 2 bad games, and like I said, it wasn't like. And I'll bring it up again. It was like the Nick Saban year where they lost on the final field goals. They got manhandled the whole time. So you mean it's the last thing you really put on film aside from beating Auburn 28-14. But before then, when the committee kind of tightened their grip on who's going to be in and who's going to be out, the Oklahoma game was huge for them. It's the same thing. We could talk about Colorado. Colorado, if they take care of business against Kansas, then they can have an argument. But not taking care of business against Kansas, they're not out here on TV talking about they deserve a shot because they went 9-3.
Because they're not in the SEC.
But that's what I'm saying. So it's like it's a privilege of the position that they're in, and I respect it. But in the same sense, just because you're in that position, you can make the argument, doesn't mean as the committee has to buy into it. You know what I mean? Like someone has to say, you got to win your games. You can't win. You can't lose late. That's always like a big thing. Like
even though it's stupid. I'm on the
fence with Ohio State.
I think that's stupid though. You know what I'm saying? Like okay, so like I get it in a sense of you're playing bad your last few games, you're limping into the playoff. I get it from that standpoint. But using the committee's words, we look at the whole season in a snapshot. So when you say that, then there's less emphasis on when did you lose versus who you lost to. Now, you can get into that and say that they lost to an unranked Michigan, but this is the problem.
Teams that are available. Show me one team out of the top 8 teams that you thought were not going to make it in. We knew somehow Bama they were going to get Bama.
I thought Tennessee wouldn't get Georgia. In.
You knew Oregon because they're the big Nike.
Yeah, I knew.
Okay, was going to get a run. You knew Notre Dame. If Notre Dame's record was good enough to get them in the mix, we talked about this before, it was going to get in. It's not a lot of meritocracy in regards to this committee. They can stand up there and piss in your pocket and tell you it's raining all day, but we know that if any of these teams were even close, because if you keep it a buck, if Georgia loses this week, they're going to be 10-3. Bama's going to be 9-3. They shouldn't be in. It has to be a line. Like they can't get that much more leeway than everybody else. If that's the case, just scratch this whole thing.
But that's the problem That's where the strength of schedule comes in, because when you look at Georgia, they went to Austin, they went to Tuscaloosa, they went to Oxford. You know what I mean? They still had to play Tennessee. They played Clemson. So if I'm Georgia, I'm like, yeah, I got 3 losses. But look at Texas' schedule. I wouldn't have 3 losses if I had that schedule. So you can't reward the teams, and that's the problem, because there's a lot of subjectiveness.
You can't look at somebody else's castle and say, if I had those bricks, mine would be stacked like that. Like, listen,
you absolutely can, because when you look at it, Georgia and Texas
in the Southeastern Conference, you can.
No, I'm saying Georgia and Texas are in the same conference.
They tried to get Indiana out of it before they even lost the game.
That's based on their name. But that's the thing, right? Is that if I'm Georgia,
it was a hypothetical situation. They were like, if Georgia loses another game, you tell me a 3-loss Georgia isn't better than a 1-loss Indiana before either team had 3 loss. Well, before Georgia had 3.
But that's the problem with college football, because there's so many teams. You know, like in the NFL, it's easy.
Say Georgia, Alabama, you can't get in this year.
In the NFL, it's easy. You just say, "Oh, y'all got the same record. What's your record against your division? What's your record against your conference? What's your record against the other conference?" You can say that stuff. But when I'm looking at Georgia and I say, hey, Georgia has 2 SEC losses. Okay, they were at Oxford and at Tuscaloosa. So then I look at Texas and I say, yeah, they're 11-1. That's a great team, right? Oh, that Georgia team went into their house and bitched them around by 2 scores. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's one of those things, like you can't have it both ways. It can't, and that's the problem with college football, is that everybody doesn't play the same schedule. Because in the NFL, you'll go Falcons, Tampa Bay, we play the same cross-division matchups. You know what I'm saying? Georgia played Clemson out of conference. Texas played Colorado State. You know what I mean? Like, they're not the same.
Listen, I understand that certain teams do get a little bit more leeway. The problem is is that it gets extrapolated across every team, and they all think that they are it. Like I said, if everybody's a killer, what the fuck is all the punks?
Right.
Just because you're in the SEC does not mean you can't be excluded from primetime postseason opportunities.
And that's where Brett Bielema came from, because a lot of the SEC teams use the guise of, we have a good loss. First of all, fuck all that. Don't lose. But, so looking at Illinois, because, we talked about Brett Bielema and Lane Kiffin. Same record, obviously in different conferences. So Ole Miss is like, okay, I pull up to the table. I beat Georgia, but I lost to Kentucky. I lost to LSU, even though LSU ain't necessarily a bad team. They're lost
not a top tier.
They lost to USC from my conference, who lost to Minnesota. You know what I'm saying? Who lost to North Carolina.
In Atlanta, right? See, Residente gets it.
That's what I'm saying. But then, Clemson has to agree to that game, first of all. I agree with you, but Clemson has to agree to that game. And then, you look at Alabama, right? You lost to Oklahoma, you lost to Vandy, you lost to Tennessee. Okay, cool. Now, when you look at Indiana, okay, to your point, what's Indiana's big win? They don't have it.
Requirement for a big
no, I know, but when you're trying to whittle 134 teams down to 12, you have to have some kind of separators.
You're trying to whittle 25 down.
I agree.
Down to 12. 26 and 134, they're clawing and fighting and scrapping to get in. But it's basically who was in the top 25 preseason. Maybe we sprinkle in one or two, but for the most part, who do we put in the top 25? Who's going to sell out these stadiums? Who's going to get people to watch?
Right.
Whatever platform they're going to watch on.
Well, then don't call it a playoff then. Just call it an invitational.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. If you're not going to truly come up with the plan because this is exactly what I said to you. We had our conversation 2 years ago. The 4 teams are going to go to 12 teams instead of 2 SEC schools. It's going to be 4 or 5. And they're going to try to get
the committee does have requirements. You got to be in the SEC, and if your name is Bama, that's a bonus. That's the SEC's requirement. That's the committee's requirement. And so like looking at this, so looking at this, what's the reaction going to be? For example, if Boise ends up with the 3 seed, from the standpoint of they're where they are today because they played a close game at Autzen Stadium.
Well, that's the only real solace in this entire thing is like a G5 school gets a bid.
Right.
That's the only. The other 11 are basically. We talked about that pre-season.
But that's where it gets stupid. But that's where the scheduling gets stupid
because you 2 or 3 from the Big Ten, and then we're gonna fill it out with SEC.
Well, that's where you
gone. The Big 12, we'll get 1. Like we talked about this in the preseason, and I get that Bama, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, they all play in a tougher conference. I am not denying that. But we still have to be honest in the assessment.
That don't mean you get to lose to Kentucky at home and think a 4-8 Kentucky team and think that you're a playoff team. You can't do that. I'm sorry.
But like I said, the committee does what they want. We talked about it last year when it was 4 teams. You had 2 undefeated teams at 1 and 2. You had 2 one-loss teams at 3 and 4, and you had an undefeated team.
But that's why, if I'm somebody like Tulane, I agree, Residente. I think Clemson wins too. But that's where when I'm looking at, and we'll get to that in a second. But that's where I'm looking at a team like Boise. If I'm say Tulane, and I go, hold up, I went to Oklahoma. You going to tell me Oklahoma a bad team? But you're not going to penalize Alabama for losing to them. But I get penalized for losing to them. And then I played Kansas State too. Even though it was at home, I played Kansas State as well. Boise played Oregon, and then they played Wyoming. And they played New Mexico. I mean, they didn't play New Mexico. I made that up. They played Oregon State. They played Washington State that just lost to Wyoming. And they get a playoff spot because they didn't schedule anybody other than Oregon.
when you get in college football, and this has been ever since they put on leather helmets, whatever the case may be, once you start losing games, you put it in the hands of voters, writers, and now the committee. So don't lose these games and then clamor for the committee. It's it's a little disingenuous to talk about how tough your conference is, but when you don't get your way, when you feel like you're not going to get your way, and this is like guys like Paul Feinbaum, these are all the pundits on there. These are the coaches that go up to these podiums. Even Kirby Smart said it after they lost to Alabama in SEC championship games. Like, that team don't want to see us a third time. Well, you should have taken care of business. You lost by one possession. I mean, it's like you can't keep saying how tough you are, and then when the road gets tough and you can't finish the drive, you got to come out and be like, see, I think we deserve another shot because look how tough this road was. I get it.
And so,
Everything is life isn't about fairness, but his life is reality. You
mhm.
can't keep talking about how tough you are and then take L's and talk about how tough your L was. Are you
and,
tough or you're not?
and
Pick one.
see, and
Pick a
see, and that's
fucking
the
color.
thing, and that's the thing, and so that's why when I look at it, I agree with Residente that Clemson is going to beat SMU this weekend. So call that an early upset alert, I guess. But at the same time, if that happens, does that mean that SMU is automatically out? Does that mean that they fall
As,
out and Bama
as
enters for
away
real?
from using the history of the committee, even though this is a new process, history of the committee will take out the smaller non-traditional football power and insert another one. So SMU loses, you can pretty much lock Alabama in. Or who else we got? You got Penn State going against Oregon.
They're both in.
Depends. They go out there and lose 37-3.
They're both in. You're not gonna
37 to
you're not gonna
3.
take a team. You're not you're not you
9-3
you
South
you're not
Carolina,
gonna
got a
take the
nine and
number
three
three
Ole
team.
Miss. You mean to tell me 9-3 Ole Miss couldn't be 11-2 Penn State? That's gonna be the conversation. I'm not saying
You
I
you
agree with it.
you can't you
I don't
can't
agree
take
with
the
it.
you can't take a team that's number 3 right now. They lose to number 1 and you drop them from 3 to 13 or something like that. That's not going to happen.
Well, how does 8 go to 13?
8, let me see. SMU because that's fine. So if you look at it, I was going to bring that was another thing I was going to bring up. Ohio State lost to Michigan this past weekend. They fell 4 spots. Miami lost to that Syracuse team that we talked about that was not ranked, but are now. So they were good enough to get ranked now, or they were good enough to beat a ranked team to get ranked, and you drop them 6 spots. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, I don't know where that math comes from because theoretically, Syracuse would be a better
They
team
only they
than
only were
Michigan,
they
and you
only
lost on the
allowed
road versus them losing at home.
they gave it's like a what is it? Like a golf handicap. You show up to the course, this is your handicap, so that math factors into your score. Miami had a one loss handicap. We're only going to let you in this playoff if you make it through with one loss. I think even if they would have lost, so if they would have won against Syracuse, they'd have been 11-1. They would have played SMU the championship, correct?
Correct.
I think
Both
if
of them would be in.
I think SMU beats Miami, Miami would have been out. I think they had a one loss threshold that we're only going to allow certain teams with one loss to get in.
See, I think it's the other way around. I think that
You think
if
you get a 10-2 Indiana in?
no, I think that if
But how
SMU,
is 10-2
if SM in
SEC?
that scenario, I think that if SMU beats Miami, I think SMU and Miami would have got in. But if Miami would have beat SMU, only Miami would have got in. That's what I believe.
I think they were doomed from the beginning. I think they had it, like I said, they had the one loss handicap. But look, you got Tennessee at 10-2, Indiana 11-1, Notre Dame 11-1. How much more credible was Notre Dame's schedule over Indiana's?
Very.
Who? I mean, like
Like, Indiana's game was Ohio State. That was the game. They played Maryland, Michigan State, Purdue. It beat them 66-0, 1-11. They fired their coach right after.
Notre Dame, that's 6-6 US.
Notre Dame beat Notre Dame beat the Louisville team. You asked me. Notre Dame beat the Louisville team that beat Clemson. The Louisville team, that's SMU's best win, by the way. Notre Dame went into Texas A&M and won the same thing that we're trying to give Texas credit for now, because they don't got nothing else to give them credit for. They gave Army their only loss. Not saying that Army's great or anything, but that's Army's only loss. They beat Navy when Navy was undefeated. You know what I mean? So, yes, their schedule is leaps and bounds.
They lost to NIU.
They lost to NIU. But the difference is that their wins exceed that loss. When you look at Alabama, they beat Georgia, but the teams that they lost to, I don't care that you beat Georgia.
Tennessee. Okay, Ohio State, Tennessee, 10-2. They're 6-7. Alabama's 9-3. Indiana is 11-1 and they're 9, and Alabama's 11. How does that happen? That's what I mean.
I'm pretty sure there's some maneuvering to avoid rematches as well.
Arizona State. I'm talking about their actual.
Oh, you're just talking about the rank itself.
Yeah. So Arizona State's 15 at 10-2. It just. I thought because it's narrative, right? I thought it was going to be interesting. What I'm finding out that it isn't.
Well, it's not going to be interesting until we see something that shouldn't happen.
That's the thing. A lot of this already shouldn't happen.
So if the bracket looked like this, and this is where we started, and Arizona State beat Penn State, Notre Dame beat Bama, Indiana beats Georgia, that's interesting. You know what I'm saying? Otherwise, it just is what it is.
I don't know. I just feel like the teams won't get the credit they deserve, or if they lose a tough game, it's going to impact next year.
Well, that's where
Indiana, if it plays out this way and Georgia's playing Indiana in the first round, we know it should shake up when different conferences, whatever the case may be. It's just that it feels like it's deliberately shaping up to be another. We don't want another TCU versus Georgia national championship game. And this year, if Indiana, if you just have another bad game against a good team, it happens to every team. Then next year, when that 9-3 Ole Miss team and you get a 11-1, just hypothetically Purdue. Say Purdue they get a couple transfers and they just make this miraculous turnaround. Now they're 11-1, 10-2 in the Big Ten. It's gonna be like, nah. We saw what happened last year when we had Indiana versus Georgia. They ran them out of the building.
That will happen, and that's the thing, right? So if Boise ends up with the 3, if Boise ends up with the 3, because I feel that if Penn State and Texas win, Texas is going to be number 1, Penn State going to be number 2, or should Penn State jump Texas and be number 1 for taking out number 1 from the number 3 spot? So that's a conversation that you'll have to have. But if Clemson wins the ACC, and it doesn't matter who wins the Big 12 because Arizona State's 15, Iowa State's 16, so it doesn't even matter. But if Clemson wins the ACC, I don't know if you can vault Clemson all from 17 all the way to in front of Boise. So Boise ends up as that 3 seed. And now, what does the SEC, Big Ten, whoever, those are the 2 big boys, those are the 2 players. What do they do in reaction to that next year? Because Boise's going to get a first round bye if they win.
Yeah, but we talked about the first round bye not being like as.
Well, no, we were talking about the difference between 1 and 5. Because just looking at this right now, if you're the 5, you get Arizona State, you win that game, you get Boise, which is going to just looking at the bracket as it is right now. So you're going to have the perception of having the easy way out, whereas Oregon at number 1 has to play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. I don't know. If this was the NFL, you would rework that. And if Arizona State won, they would play Oregon.
Pan out that way. Especially if one of these double-digit seeds makes it, past the quarterfinals because they got the whole G5 winner, whatever the case may be, and now you have Arizona State playing, closing in on a national championship game. They're like, no, we can't have that. We can't
Well,
have
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The intention for this was for the
Oregon versus
G5.
Arizona State.
The intention of this playoff was for the G5 to be the 12 seed. That was the intention of this playoff. We gonna give them a spot. They go into 12, and then you do play Penn State in the first round. And if you're lucky enough to get past that, then you play number 4, conference champion or whatever.
Realistically, I think this is a testament to the transfer portal. Good, bad, or indifference in the NIL. I think people want to shoot it down, but if you think about it, Indiana, their coach came from JMU. He immediately transferred in players who knew his system and that can make an immediate impact.
And he went to Ohio and got the MAC Player of the Year as the quarterback.
And then, 8-9 years ago, I believe, they'd have to sit for a year. I believe they just changed that. Maybe it might be like less than that, probably like 5 or 6 seasons where they didn't have to sit for a year. So now he comes in, he gets a transfer, like you said, from Ohio. He brings guys from JMU, and now they're 11-1. Are they a powerhouse? No. But you get an opportunity to see other teams. SMU, same thing. Like the transfer portal, Dylan Gabriel in Oregon.
So I got a question for you. You just peaked something that I caught earlier today. So next year, I was talking a couple of months ago. I was talking about the House versus NCAA case where they were talking about paying student athletes, so on and so forth. Starting next season, 25-26. That's next season. There's revenue sharing now. So on top of NIL, there's revenue sharing now where the initial cap for that year is $20.5 million. So they can distribute this money any way they see fit throughout the athletes in the university. So if they wanted to give money to basketball players, volleyball, so on and so forth, you got your Livy Dunns and people like that, but they have that cap that they can use to pay whatever players they choose to pay. So you could have somebody bring in a quarterback, pay that quarterback $6 million. And then you got to fill out, hey, here's an offensive lineman, here's this. But there's still NIL separate from that. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said,
the power is going to shift right back to the
time. Right. Do you think that it turns back into the Yankees and the Dodgers, basically? Like, are we going to be back to the Bamas, the haves and have-nots?
Well, it's never shifted completely away from the Bamas. It gave Indiana an opportunity. It gave Tulane opportunities. It gave 5-star guys that would normally be sitting behind 2 or 3 guys on USC's roster to go to Arizona State, to go to Colorado. So it's giving guys movement, and it will backfire. Guys will move, off the motion. Guys will go to the wrong school. Quinn Ewers was in Ohio State's program. Like, he left high school early and realized, like, nah, this is not. I
heard something
right to Texas and start. So it was like,
I heard something so disgusting. I heard something so disgusting earlier. So they were talking about how Oregon had Bo Nix last year. They went into the portal and got Dylan Gabriel this year. And this person said, what if Quinn Ewers decides to stay in Oregon, goes get him next year? That was nasty.
Well, to see where his draft position is going to be. If they think he's going to be a top 10 quarterback, then there's no way in hell he comes back. But if they think, hey, we think Arch is going to be the guy, hey, you gotta make tough decisions in this world. But yeah, I feel like the NIL money and the school money and the endowment money and the revenue sharing, it's always going to be the schools that have more. Like, Oregon's had the biggest booster. Hell, Oregon's booster, their biggest booster, gives shoes to half the professional athletes in America. Everyone was buying Jordans, and Oregon played for a national championship in 2015. Like, it doesn't just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean like it's going to turn out. But they've had
they played for it
because
they played for it against Cam Newton too.
Yeah, they were using the uniforms as probably their biggest recruiting tool because a lot of Oregon colored inspired Jordans and cleats and things like that were really big for resale. So I don't know if all the players kept their cleats, but if you didn't play that day and they had a fresh pair of cleats, some LeBron Oregon inspired cleats in your locker, and you can resell so they were using that stuff beforehand, all the uniform combinations. So they were already getting their money. You have the endowments, and you can offer different scholarship opportunities. So the people with the money are always going to get a lot of really good players, but it's not enough opportunity for all these top 12 to 15 schools to get all the good players because I don't care how much money you're paying a starting quarterback. If I'm fourth on the depth chart and I know I can start for Arizona State or I can start for Arizona or I can start for insert any good team that throws the ball around. We talked about your boy McCord in Syracuse leading the nation in passing. As long as I can get out there,
Ohio State could have used him the other day,
and showcase my skills. You got to keep in mind when you're the man on campus. That's all you need to be. I don't need to be the man in the whole country. I'm 19, 20, 21 years old. I'm living life. I'm eating for free at all these restaurants in this little town with my colleges. I'm good. Everybody. So Alabama's going to have the money. USC's going to have the money. UCLA's going to have the money, and they'll have to figure out how to keep their players happy because you could cut that $6 million check, but as long as if they don't lock them into a 4-year, you can't transfer contract, then you might be shelling out $6 million every year trying to buy the next great transfer. Meanwhile, that guy's like all the dudes in Utah, they got trucks. I read something that was hilarious. It was
not at all.
It was when they got all the players in Utah got pickup trucks. I don't know how many dealerships participated, but they all got trucks. And then it was the beginning of the season, they all ran on the field, got their trucks. And one of the comments said, yeah, when they go 4-8, they're gonna drive those trucks to new schools.
There you go. But so real quick, so real quick, here's some of this that I was talking about, the revenue sharing. So yesterday, Judge Claudia Wilkin of the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of California granted preliminary approval of House versus NCAA class action settlement agreement to award former college athletes roughly $2,780,000,000. That number threw me off for a second. I was prepared to say million. I was prepared to say million, and then I saw where that 2 was. So whoo. So according to the settlement's language, so this is the revenue sharing part. The payments are capped at roughly 22% of institutional revenue. So the first year cap is expected to be around $22 million. So that's going to be money that the universities can give out however they see fit, whether that's recruits, whether that's to keep a guy that is thinking about leaving to go along with some NIL. That could change the game, because you get into those conversations of a school like Indiana can keep up with Bama because they got this money from the Big Ten TV deal. But this is where schools like Florida State and Clemson were looking at the ACC saying, well, we only making half of what the SEC is making. so you're only making half of what the SEC is making, and a school like Wake Forest has to try to make that revenue work the same way that a school like Bama would. That's where you get into these issues, So that's just a small snippet of, that was from Sports Illustrated NIL Daily. So this goes into effect next year. So going into next season, we may see a whole different college football than we see this year, just in that window. But real quick,
I'm trying to find.
My Seminoles. My Seminoles have a new offensive coordinator. My Seminoles have a new defensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn. He left his head coaching position, Chip Kelly style, at UCF to come be the coordinator for Florida State. Tony White from Nebraska, defensive coordinator with that 3-3-5 coming down to Tallahassee. I'm
You didn't
excited.
keep what's the boy, Randy Shannon?
No. But we'll see what happens. But in related news, a couple of guys that we talked about, Neil Brown, Ryan Walters, they gone. That's West Virginia and Purdue, respectively. So it sounds like, from what I've been hearing, the little inklings on the ground is Purdue may reach out to Liberty and Jamie Chadwell. They may reach out to Western Kentucky for Tyson Helton.
The Hilltoppers.
Yeah, the Hilltoppers. Go Toppers. Rice hired Scotta Bell from Davidson. But what shocked me was Appalachian State firing Sean Clark. So it's going to be interesting to see who they get. Kennesaw State wins the Not Loyal at All award because they fired the dude that helped them get to FBS in the first year that they were FBS. And he beat Liberty, by the way. Yep. So they hired Jerry Mack, who is the Jacksonville Jaguars running back coach. He's going to be the head coach at Kennesaw State. So that's interesting as well. He was a head coach at North Carolina Central, so go HBCUs. FAU fired Tom Herman. They hired Texas Tech offensive coordinator Zach Kitley yesterday, and something that'll make Mr. Logical laugh just a little bit. Apparently, there's interest between Charlotte, the 49ers, not to be confused with San Francisco, and Bobby Petrino. He's still trying to work his way back. Still trying to work his way back.
It's like, I don't know if unless you really love coaching.
He's trying to do what he got to do to get to another job. You know what I mean? Because remember so he went.
I think the maybe the incident he had with his assistant where they crashed his motorcycle.
Yeah,
I think that probably weighs more than him quitting on Atlanta because. Terrible.
Yeah, but that's where he's trying to rehabilitate. He went to Missouri State, came into Arkansas, gave them a scare. That's probably why he ended up as their offensive coordinator. They were FCS at the time. They're going to be FBS in the next few seasons. So now he went up to Texas A&M under Jimbo, which these coaches got to stop taking these coordinator jobs when a dude is getting fired the next year. We knew Jimbo's job was on the line, just like those dudes. I'm happy that they signed with Florida State, but I can't guarantee that Mike Norvell is going to be the coach after next year.
Just got to get a nice fat deal. So if they do decide to fire him and the next guy wants to bring in his own guy, cool.
But Arkansas did
$22 million in slide.
But Arkansas did decide to keep Sam Pittman. Obviously Florida's keeping Billy Napier. Temple hired KC Killer from Sam Houston. So looking at West Virginia, what name I heard for that job?
Jimbo, right? When it's you always.
Well, of course. Well, first of all, no. I said Jimbo was going to go to West Virginia. Yeah. I didn't hear that. I said that. But anyway, I did hear his name involved. But the name that stands out is Rich Rodriguez.
Oh, he's back, huh?
Well, he's the head coach at Jacksonville State. They beat Florida State a few years ago when they were FCS. They're in the Conference USA Championship game this weekend against my Hilltoppers. So, keep your eye on Rich Rod going back home if it ain't Jimbo. But I like Jimbo. ECU decided to hire their defensive coordinator, Blake Harrell. He was the defensive coordinator and then took over as the interim head coach. Went 4-1 after Mike Houston got fired. So lots of coaching stuff going on. Mike McIntyre is out at FIU. Maybe Ray Lewis will throw his name in there. I don't know. But, so it sounds like the carousel has slowed down some. There's not much going on. There's not many rumors right now. But it's not over yet. Chip Kelly stayed until February before he decided to leave to go to Ohio State. So it's not over yet. You got National Signing Day tomorrow. You got the transfer portal officially opening next Monday. So right now you have the upperclassmen
after the bowl games.
So right now, this is the problem. I'll get to that. So you have right now the seniors. So the guys that are going to be 5th year seniors, so on and so forth. Their portal is open right now. Monday it opens for everybody. But to your point,
bowl games.
No, I know, but to your point, the reason that it doesn't exist that way is because to be eligible, these guys have to be enrolled by a certain time. And that eligibility window for like spring football and all that stuff. So the date, if I remember correctly, is January 15th that you have to be enrolled and on campus at your new school if you want to participate in that next season.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So that's why it's that way.
Open in early December when you have bowl games. Like if you think about the Florida State Bowl, like guys were transferring out before the bowl games
because they're not going to a bowl.
Well, some guys were going to bowls and still transferred out.
I know, but
guys to opt out.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. But that's the danger when you have a playoff, right? Is that the bowl games don't matter, So dudes are either trying to protect their NFL stock and not play a useless game and get hurt, or guys are going to get an early start on what they're trying to do next year. So, and being that January 15th is that date, these guys got to go through admissions and whatever else to try to get the paperwork, squared away, all that kind of stuff, just to be able to get on campus. So that's where the NCAA has the problem. Maybe signing day needs to move. Something like that.
Day was later. I thought signing day was
well. They have the February one, which is the final. This is the early signing day.
Okay.
So that starts tomorrow. So
interesting.
So that's where we are right now. And then you add the revenue sharing. So, so what do you do? Like Liberty's quarterback is basically, it's already been known that he's going to enter the transfer portal. So if Jamie Chadwell ends up at Purdue, like I mentioned, then maybe he goes to Purdue with Jamie Chadwell. But if that happens, he got to get that jump on there so he could be enrolled by January 15th.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's necessary. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. To me,
and remember we talked about Charles Huff.
We should do this. Like, I get it.
And remember we talked about Charles Huff. We talked about Charles Huff, the head coach at Marshall. We remember him from pre-Ohio State game, talking a lot of trash, but they obviously got humbled. But Marshall is in the Sun Belt Championship game this weekend against Louisiana. Not to be confused with Louisiana Lafayette, their former name. They're just Louisiana now. But they're playing against Louisiana in the Sun Belt, but there's rumors that he's going to take the head coaching job at Southern Miss, which is weird because your team is in the conference championship game and you're rumored to leave for a team in your conference. This ain't a power forward job that you're potentially leaving for.
Just like a lateral move.
Yeah, a lateral move. And it's probably a worse move considering that they fired their coach in season. But the problem is that he doesn't have a contract. After this bowl game, contract is over.
Maybe it's just leverage.
You know what I'm saying? Or maybe there's a breakup coming where, maybe he just don't want to be there no more. Because we've seen last year, we saw Alabama take Buffalo's head coach and make him a defensive backs coach. They took South Alabama's head coach, made him the defensive coordinator. Chip Kelly left UCLA to go be Ryan Day's offensive coordinator. And, Ryan Day, real quick before we get out of here, too. Let me tell you what Ryan Day is doing. Ryan Day's still trying to respond and find Lou Holtz. When I was watching this game against Michigan, he keeps trying to prove that Ohio State is as tough or tougher than Michigan. And you can't.
Confused.
And you can't.
When he almost called 2 timeouts in a row, which would have been a penalty, ended up being something where they got a first down automatically. Because you can't call back-to-back timeouts.
Like, do what you do.
He just looked confused.
Because Michigan's got his mind. I don't believe in curses per se, but there's some juju there. And Ohio State fans are having flashbacks of John Cooper back in the 90s. Ohio State coming to the game 10-0. They only played 11 games back then. They would come in 10-0 and lose to like an 8-3 Michigan team. And he kept that job, so that they like, hey, we can't let Ryan Day get away with this.
It was a couple of times they panned over to him before Jack Sawyer got the interception at the goal line.
Did you see his beard running?
Nah, I just saw like this. He had this look like
he damn sure didn't know what to do when the fight broke out.
Yeah, but he had that same look during the game, and it's like, is that look like, am I done? Am I moving? Am I fired?
Well, there are rumors that he's been angling for NFL jobs. So we'll see what happens.
Man,
You
I
know, because
don't
like I
know.
said, he was on the Philadelphia Eagles
Look,
staff.
you after you get that interception at home, probably one of your most galvanizing players gets this pick. You come out flat. I think they ran the ball like 2 times. They had like a bad out route and had to punt it right back. They didn't even get a first down.
So here's a
All of
question
that
for you.
momentum, and he just was like,
Here's a question for you. Since you brought that up, so Marcus Freeman, head coach at Notre Dame.
"Don't go to Chicago."
Hold on,
That's what you're
wait.
thinking. Okay,
Oh, well, I
sorry.
guess you already answered
Yeah,
my
don't do it.
question before I
Don't
even asked it. I
do.
wasn't going to ask. Well, what I was going to ask was, should he go to the Bears, or if his alma mater up in Columbus comes open, should he go to Ohio State instead? That's
Stay
what
at
I was
Notre
going to
Dame.
ask you.
Stay at stay at Notre Dame because you're gonna get
Well, you going to turn down home?
yeah. Because the problem with home has been really really good since Urban Meyer got your house built up. But he was he has carpenter experience. He did a lot of stuff on his own, getting guys in, installing a system. He brought a system from Bowling Green to Utah, Florida, all these different places. He had a lot with him. So when he got there and he built this house up, it was like dope. Ryan Day just tried to maintain the house. Now people feel like it's collapsed. You got to come back in and build it back up because not winning national championships at Ohio State to them probably looks like the house of cards is collapsing. Notre Dame, they want to be as good as they are right now. Like I'm pretty sure they want to win national championships, but being 11-1, 10-2, independent, is having all this leverage. I think they're good with that, and I think it's smart of him. Chicago hasn't shown that they could put together a team of professionals that can then put a team of professionals on the field. So, like your front office, your president, the decision makers, they always seem to be like a step behind each other. So one ends up firing the other one, or the other one gets fired, and then you kind of roll, and it's never like a cohesive approach. So coach, quarterback, coordinator, like if they're promoting guys in season from positions that aren't doing well on the team.
Yeah, and like Thomas Bryan. Like I mean, he was a passing game coordinator, became an offensive coordinator, and then 2 weeks later, he's the head coach. You
Yeah,
know,
and they're not going to keep him. So do
that's
you
a hell
get
of a
rid of
month.
the GM? So yeah,
Well,
Chicago.
well, last year there were rumors that the Bears were interested in Ryan Day, like if they had let Eberflus go. That was one of the people that they were looking at. And then, when I peeled it back, because of course I was like, that don't make no sense. But then, I peeled it back and I was like, oh, their team president, Kevin Warren, was the commissioner of the Big Ten, before Petiti. So, like
Yeah,
there's
call
a
him,
connection
call him
there.
Mike Vrabel or Brian Leftwich.
Well, and that's why, if Charles Huff leaves Marshall, maybe Marshall calls Byron Leftwich and he goes home. Because I don't know if Byron Leftwich was getting an NFL job for a while, after, how that thing went down in Jacksonville.
Well, the Jacksonville thing is warranted because I've heard people talk about it this year that dude still has his job.
I know, but you
He
normally
wanted
but you
fired.
normally have
He
those
wanted him fired
conversations when
anyway.
you're in the building, not when you're trying to get into the building.
No,
Like
because
if you went to a job interview, you wouldn't say, well, yeah, like if you fire that general manager, I'll come here.
yeah, but you should in certain situations, like when you go to Chicago, you should be like the Williams family should have pulled an Eli. I'm like, listen, we're not coming there with Eberflus because what Justin Fields was able to do in college, it looked pretty much the same as what Caleb Williams gave you, except Caleb Williams won a Heisman.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields was outstanding in college. And then he got to Chicago with Matt Eberflus and was like, this isn't working. Granted, he had a little Matt Nagy in there too, but Eberflus came in and was like, this isn't working. It's not improving. Nothing looks like it's improving. You got to get rid of the coach before you draft my son. That should have happened because I called it, and I'm a fan of the sport. I'm not an insider. Like I can tell you, like this wasn't going to go well, and the reason it doesn't because what Leftwich was saying, like, listen, this guy's made terrible moves, getting Urban Meyer in there, all the other BS that came along with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm recognizing that my job is going to be tied to him, and he's going to blame me and have the power to fire me when he hasn't shown me he knows what he's doing.
And maybe if Byron Leftwich had a little more cachet, which you would have thought he would have had playing for the Jaguars, but if he had a little more cachet, if he was a Mike Vrabel, maybe you can make those comments and get dismissed. But as a guy that has never been a head coach, I don't know if you get away with that.
I mean, obviously he didn't, but like he made a valid point. He made a valid point.
No, he very much did make a valid point.
3 years ago, because now they're ready to fire Doug. They should be ready to fire Doug Peterson.
I'm just glad nobody's talking Jeannie Buss into making good moves.
She wouldn't listen anyway.
but yeah, at the end of the day, this Ryan Day thing is interesting because I'm like, what's the bar now? Because the way that I feel, I don't want to bring feelings to a fact fight, but the way that I feel is like, if you're going to fire the dude, fire the dude. Like, stop this whole thing year in, year out, where his job is, like whatever the case may be.
Publicly by anybody, like, hey,
no,
or he hasn't been.
You nasty, Mike. No, but the thing is that, if I'm him and I look at this as I got us to a national title game. We were a missed field goal away from beating Georgia and playing TCU that year for the national title. If you want to fire me, let's do it. You know what I'm saying? And, or if his job is on the line, I'll say if his job is on the line, what's the line? If they make it to the national title game, but doesn't win it, is his job on the line? Or does he get credit for making the national title game? Now, obviously, if you get in the first round, hypothetically, and let's say you lose to Boise State in the first, okay, like, you going to get some shit. You know what I mean? But if I make it to the national title game and we lose to, say, Oregon, we lose to Oregon, who hasn't lost all year.
If it looks a lot like the game against Michigan, any game he has going on for the rest of this year, if it looks like that game against Michigan where you flat out did not deploy your top flight wide receiver,
this is the problem. And see, if I was looking at teams,
coaching, you got to have them ready. And it's like, how do you not have these guys getting?
If I was looking at teams, and the bracket was what it is, I would pick Ohio State to beat Tennessee more than likely. The problem is that when you get into the psyche, after this Michigan game, where's Ohio State's head right now? Especially when, so you could go one or two ways, right? You get into the playoff, this is our chance for redemption. Or you get into the playoffs and you're like, we were supposed to win the Big Ten. We weren't supposed to lose to Oregon. We damn sure were supposed to end the Michigan thing this year. So do the players start to feel a certain way about Ryan Day because they're listening to the noise, even if they don't feel that way, but they're listening to the noise.
One reprieve is they don't have to risk another potential loss before the playoff. Like, so they didn't lose to Michigan, but still had to play in the Big Ten championship. And then potentially lose there and not make the playoff at all.
If you're an Ohio State fan, if you were an Ohio State fan, and you see Penn State beat Oregon this weekend, what's your reaction as an Ohio State fan?
We good, because I know we can beat Penn State. Straight up, like that's what I would think, and I honestly believe that. In hindsight, 50-50. Or hindsight's 20/20. Excuse me. you don't have to play another game, and you're shoe-in locked to get into the playoffs. At
Right.
10-2, you're Ohio State, you're in. Like I said, if there was a situation where at 10-2 they're playing the 12-0 Oregon next week, I think then you'd get a lot of pressure. Then you'd have guys wondering, like, if is this coach the guy? But since you're going to get a couple of weeks, and like I said, let me check my bracket that I had up, and if it stays, like where it is, that gets you a game against Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee's not world beaters. They're a good SEC school, but they don't have you outmanned position by position or have the upper hand on you mentally because they've beaten you. Oregon's beaten you this year already, and Michigan's beaten you for the last 4 years. So they have a mental edge there. Tennessee is all new. I think if we probably search the history of Oregon or Ohio State Tennessee matchups, you probably haven't had one since 1980 something crazy like that. So
Yeah,
I feel like
there's the playoff schedule.
They have that, but if they were 10-2, like for instance, how some of these teams lost their last game and still are playing in their conference championship, and you're risking another loss, I think a 10-3 Ohio State with 2 losses to Oregon, they don't make the playoffs.
Oh, look at that national title game down in the compressor. You know what I'm saying? Only championship game being played down there this year, huh?
Listen, I mean,
but there's the playoff schedule. So there's the playoff schedule. The playoffs start on the 20th. So do you feel, and this will be the last question, do you feel that if you're an Ohio State player, do you want to play this weekend? Not necessarily a conference championship game per se, because obviously you would say yes, but would you want to play now, or do you feel like you need this break, recalibrate, and then come back out for the playoff?
That's tough, because I remember Urban Meyer when Florida played Ohio State, and Troy Smith was the Heisman winner. I just knew Ohio State was going to win that. Ted Ginn takes the kickoff back, and then they break his ankle celebrating. I remember Urban Meyer said in an interview, he said, every week we practice as if we had a game on Saturday, keep the guys fresh. I don't know if that same philosophy applies to Ryan Day and Ohio State, but like I said, when he talked about that week, I think it was a crazy. This is, I think, like November was the game. Like they had it was like 50 days or something between the last game they played and the championship was like January 8th. I think they played the week of Thanksgiving, and the championship game was January 8th. I don't know why it was so far out, but Troy Smith was at all. They talked about he was at all the banquets. He was doing all the things. They felt like he gained a little bit of weight because he just was going to New York for this award ceremony, going to this award ceremony, just kind of traveling. He said that they worked every single week like they had a game on Saturday. So if Ryan Day has that kind of approach, keep guys engaged, they're good to go. Like I said, not risking a third loss is probably, it might be enough for Will Howard to kind of just sit back, really go over film, because it was a couple of those guys were open. The wide receivers are too talented not to be open on some of those plays that they were calling. He just wouldn't let it go because he probably didn't want to make the mistake, which held him back from making the play. Because you need a great villain for a great hero to exist. So you got to risk the ball to make the great play.
Okay. Fair enough. Saying that's why I asked you the question, saying, because there you go with the insight. Saying. So we will be back on Friday, and you know what that means. Whole lot of picks, conference championship picks, NFL picks. We'll probably react to Green Bay and Detroit, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Saying one of these days I'm going to talk about how the hell Russell Westbrook scored 24 points in a fourth quarter and they still lost the game by 17.
Saw a stat today against LeBron. It's like 24 threes in a row.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stats you get when you're LeBron. I'm pretty sure people.
That's the kind of stats you get when you got 40-year-old legs.
He needs to take a break.
You know what I'm saying? And that's what
practice.
JJ made the comment. Like he said something like, I don't know if, because LeBron, I guess, wants to play all 82 this year. And he was like, I don't know. JJ was like, I don't know if that's the best thing for us. And it's not, obviously. So Obviously Embiid hasn't been playing again. Like Milwaukee's turning it on now. Hartenstein's back, so look for the Thunder to take off now. Houston looking good. The NBA's in good hands. Like the Pistons been turning it around, like I said they would. I don't know, Mr. Logical, but I mean, even though the NBA isn't very exciting these days, there's a few teams to kind of look at and be like, maybe the league will be okay. Maybe the league will be okay.
I think the league is fine. You just need a little time.
Yeah. Let it marinate. You know what I'm saying? Or as a wise man once said,
put a little barbecue sauce on it.
As a wise man once said, let that bitch breathe. We'll be back Friday. We love you. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the good things. Do all the free things. Peace.